Amy, could I ask you a question or?
Sure. Yes, please. Go ahead.
We've been talking a lot to Margot. Okay, let's say you experience.
What's your name? Sorry, what's your name?
Steve
Steve.
Gershman.
Great.
Okay, so going through, in terms of let's you do the Dharma practice, you get really good, and let's say you experience a sudden death. You're unconscious, you be in a coma, and bad anesthesia, you fall off your ladder, die, whatever. So then what happens with all that practice? And how does that fit in, so to speak, with because now you can't sit there and really go into I guess you're from what I've gotten so far, preparing for your death with people around you, and you can go into the subtleties. You can't do that anymore. So that's it. It's over. So and I'm just wondering, and tell me if I'm wrong, according to Buddhism, if you can get into the deepest subtlety of thought, you can, it seems, control your rebirth, coming back into a better place. So if you experience a sudden death, you can't do that. So I'd like you to clarify that for me.
Well, based on your lifetime of practice, however much you're able to make imprints in your mind of positive practice, whether you have a slow death of sickness or aging, or a quick death from an accident or something, or a heart attack, what is most familiar on your mind is what's going to be present. So if you are very familiar with your practice and what you're supposed to be visualizing, that can come up regardless. And the higher levels of realization you have, higher levels of realization, you'd be able to choose your rebirth and control your experience in the in-between state, in the transition. So that's what we're trying to do. Right now, for most ordinary beings, we uncontrollably go into the bardo. Bardo simply is a Sanskrit word that means in between. And we go into this transition uncontrollably, just in a search for the next rebirth. But the search is uncontrollable, and it's based on whatever seeds are imprinted in our mind, based on the activities of our body, speech, and mind. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about tomorrow. So we don't have any control over that. And that's the way most ordinary people die and experience that transition. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, because from my understanding, I thought you were in control of it. The way, if you could kind of experience your own death, in a gradual process. That's what I thought. So it's
well, the more you can, and the more imprints again you have in your consciousness of practice and of recognizing those internal visions that will occur, then you certainly have a better chance at having a better rebirth. But you have to be at a pretty high level of realization, I think, to really control where you'll take rebirth. So we try to make as many imprints each life right now, trying to evolve a little more each time. And I think some of you already, from speaking with some of you notice when you've gotten into Dharma practice, and it was very foreign to you initially, but some of you mentioned to me you have a spark where you started a certain type of practice, or you went to a certain monastery or a temple or a center, and you saw something and it felt very familiar to you. So where do you think that's from? I would think it's got to be from some past imprint. I've had a few of those in my life. And you see this with even, one example I give is one of my nephews. He's now close to 30, but when he was a baby, and he has a brother a year and a half older than him, but in the apartment when they used to live in New York, and the apartment, and one time we were looking for him in the apartment, and it wasn't that big of an apartment, but it had a few rooms, and we'd find, he'd be 1 year old, and I'd find him in a corner of the room, one of the bedrooms, with a big book across his lap, opened up. He couldn't read at 1 year old, but he was just always crawling off to the bookshelf, crawling over to the bookshelf, you know, opening up the books, pulling the books off the shelves. His brother, a year and a half older, had absolutely no interest in the books. Like, he liked when you would read to him, but he had no interest on his own. And the younger one has grown up to be a huge reader. So I just kind of thought there's an imprint of reading in his consciousness that has come back. And we all have certain things that we kind of started to do in this life. And some of it was very familiar and we did it really easily and liked doing it. And other things, it doesn't come. So I would just think there's some imprint in there. Must come, or just ask yourself, where does it come from? For those especially that don't believe in reincarnation, check and think, like, how come I like to do this, but my sister doesn't enjoy that at all, and we're from the same parents? And if you've ever noticed, if you have siblings, how many of you have siblings? Okay, so Steve, are you very much like them? Are you all very much alike?
I have an older brother. No, not at all.
Okay, and you're from the same parents?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so it's interesting, from the same parents, not similar at all. So does your mind come from your parents, and are you only a product of their influence and that environmental influence around you? And or do you think there's something in there already that comes in?
I always thought that was temperament, something that, you know, babies are born with. That's what I was always led to believe.
Right. And when you check a little bit further, because again, I wasn't a, you know, believer in reincarnation initially. If you check further, I kind of wondered, you know, a lot of people don't question it. They go, my brother's like this, I'm like this. So what? Most people don't question. And as a kid, for some reason, I just questioned it. Like, how come he's like that and I'm like this and she's like that? And I thought that was really interesting, really curious. So I started poking at, how come I come in with these interests and I'm, you know, finding this something in somebody else? So, you know, I looked for, what are the causes of that? What causes you to be a certain way? And the only thing that's really satisfied me is the imprints have to be in the mind or the consciousness, which Buddhism sees separate and different from the brain, because the brain is a physical structure that's in the body, and the mind is separate from the body, even though it can reside and move along with the body, but separate from that, not part of the body. That's why the mind's able to go on when the body dies, according to Tibetan Buddhist belief. But after checking, but please, each of you check up and really think. I mean, I thought about these things for a long time. And the reason was, for me, and you know, not that I'm not a Buddha, okay, but from the Buddha's first teaching was, there is suffering. First noble truth. So he has an experience, gets out of the palace, and in one day with his attendants, he sees 4 things. He sees an old person, a sick person, a dead person, and a spiritual mendicant, and like a spiritual person, and he's riveted. He is shocked by these things. He's never had exposure to this. And when he sees, you know, old, sick, and dead is pretty sad, right? Like something we'd like to avoid. And when he asks his attendants about it, they give him the message, and they wake him up to the fact that this happens to everybody. Everyone will experience this to some degree, and it's shocking for him. And he freaks out and kind of thinks, first of all, there's got to be a cause. So noble truth number 2, like he wakes up to the suffering, there's suffering. And then he teaches number 2, there's a cause to the suffering. Because you can't get rid of the suffering until you know where it came from. Okay, the cause, karma and delusion. Karma we're talking about tomorrow, and delusion. Karma and delusion is the cause of your suffering. So again, as a kid, I didn't know any of that. I wasn't Buddhist, wasn't raised Buddhist. But, you know, occasionally my parents and I, we went to downtown Philadelphia or New York City for a day, and there were poor people on the street. And we went through some poor, what looked like poor neighborhoods that were different than my neighborhood. And I asked my parents, why are these people like this? How come these people are struggling and I have a house and a bed? Somehow so there must have been some imprint in me of this path, because my siblings didn't have that. They didn't have those kind of questions as much. And so I really wanted to know how do you end this thing? But in order to get to the end of it, you need to know the origin. What's the cause of the suffering in order to bring about an end to it? And if you don't understand, so one thing I'd ask all of you, consider and have a look at, what do you think is the cause of your suffering? What do you think is the cause of your suffering? It's something you can really delve deeply into. Now, there's people on the planet, as you know right now, that find when their suffering rears its head, and for some of them it's all the time, and for some of them it's occasionally and now and then, but a lot of people on the planet are suffering, as you know. And we also suffer in different ways. We suffer in more blatant ways, and we also suffer from change. And even certain pleasure is a form of suffering, like that, but we don't often see that. But people that are suffering, there's a number of people on the planet right now, some of them I've interacted with over the last few months, that when they suffer, their choice and where they see it coming from is external. And they blame somebody external or something external to them. That's the cause of the suffering. So if I remove, I'll give some example of, they want, like, our county council, because they raise taxes for blah. So if you remove the county council, then they would be happy because their property taxes wouldn't go up. That's their view. So check it out, because you remove the county council, let's say your property taxes don't go up, but some other suffering is going to show up on their horizon. And then they're going to find the next external cause and say, so again, Master Shantideva was saying, your choice is, if you want things to be comfortable and free of suffering, you have options. You can cover the whole planet in a very smooth material to walk around on, right? You can get rid of everybody else that bothers you, okay? Or the option is, cover your own feet with the smooth thing. Take care of your own mind and then see what the planet's like. Is it more peaceful? Are you more gentle with yourself and others? Are you taking responsibility for your crap, basically? And that's where I find is the source of noble truth number 3. There's a cessation, there's an end to the suffering. And that begins with me taking responsibility for my mind and dealing with my ignorance, my fundamental ignorance. And noble truth number 4, there's a path to the end, a path to the end of the suffering. And that's the Noble Eightfold Path, and the path that we're walking on, and with this, certainly this tradition of Tibetan Buddhism and other forms of Buddhism as well. Okay, so we've come back, and here's a perfect opportunity to reestablish our motivation. Perfect chance to check how my mind is going. Let's just close our eyes for a moment. Begin to deepen once again your respiration. And as you do that, just notice what thought, what mental experiences might be bubbling up right now. Without any particular attachment to any one of them, just watch them. Just notice and observe. Am I feeling somewhat peaceful, or perhaps a little somber, just reflecting on death for a couple of hours this morning? Has that changed anything in my break time? Any activities in the break time? Did I spend maybe a little time at the break time thinking about the moments passing away quickly? But here I am again, another moment to get in touch with myself. Perfect timing right now. And let me check how my mind is oriented. And if it's not oriented in a particular direction I'm thrilled with, I can reorient that by setting a good motivation, reestablishing that motivation. If I like how the mind is feeling right now, I can further enhance that by reestablishing a positive motivation. So take a moment right now. This is you directing your awareness where you would like it to go and set that motivation. So please relax and slowly open your eyes. I know some of you, different places you live. I know somebody is in Austin, Texas on this call, and I know it's very hot here in Philadelphia, so it must be very hot in Austin. I hope those of you that are in hot climates have some kind of cooling device around you, because we're in a very hot 3-day period right now. This is the first day of it. What I'd like to discuss, as we were discussing, how does the mind and body get in there? How does the mind get out of the body when we die? How is it possible for it to go on? What happens? And there are these inner visions that happen that I'd like to talk about. So I mentioned this indestructible drop at the heart center, which means in the center of the wheel or energy center, the chakra, in the subtle energy system near the heart, so slightly more towards your spine. And inside that is this indestructible drop that contains the most subtle wind, physical in nature, the presence for your body, supporting your body, and mounted on that most subtle wind, the most subtle mind, containing all the karmic seeds, the imprints that your consciousness has made. How does it make those? Through the karmic imprinting process, meaning every activity I do with my body, speech, and mind makes an imprint, plants a seed in my mind. And those seeds are stored and they come to fruition through various ways that we're going to talk about tomorrow. Okay, but they're in there. Okay, so it's those seeds, those imprints that inform how that most subtle wind is going to develop and how that life will be. And I ride along like that. And so Buddhists do believe that mind is there at conception, and they believe there is a being there at conception, like that. And then you ride along, and then as we know, with the most subtle wind, it causes those cells to start to replicate once the egg is fertilized. And the cells replicate, and we know a fetus forms. And then as the fetus forms, and you know scientifically, there's like buds of the arms, and the heart starts, And that's created and allowed based on subtle winds. So the most subtle wind becomes less subtle, and subtle winds start moving through that system, creating and allowing the arm buds to create arms and the brain to develop and start functioning, and the and things like that. And then later the fetus starts moving. It allows the fetus to move, is based on the wind energy, that life force, like that. But the mind is there, not the brain. A consciousness that has no form, no shape, no color. You cannot cut the body open and go, there's the mind, according to Tibetan Buddhism. So it's very hard for us to understand this ever-flowing stream of mental events, experiences, memories, ideas, thoughts, moments of consciousness. Again, on a grosser level, like you're thinking right now. On a more subtle level, like this, 64 fluctuations of that consciousness in a finger snap. And then its most subtle experience, its clear light nature, a most luminous, pure experience of the mind that it's even hard to describe because we don't understand its experience. We don't experience because we're too distracted and gross in our minds and obscured, basically. So what we start to do, and this is more comes with tantric practice, but I am going to talk about the visions. You live your life, go along with your life, and let's say due to aging and disease, you start dying. Something manifests, whatever, you start dying. And what actually happens in the active dying process, even though we see some of this prior to the active dying process, but as I mentioned, with normal aging, the subtle winds start dissolving and absorbing, and it's a natural process. So the more we can understand, this is a natural process. We've been through this, if you believe in reincarnation, countless times, countless times. It's just like expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. It's almost like a fundamental principle of the universe. The way things flow, the ebb and flow, like the ocean. Just like us, matter expanding, matter contracting. So as we start contracting, subtle winds are degenerating and absorbing. Skin loses its luster. Our hair, because upward moving, subtle winds are dissolving, our hair turns gray or white. Our eyesight changes and becomes weaker. Our hearing changes. People's bone structure changes like that. It starts contracting, okay? Downward voiding, subtle winds absorbing. You walk more slowly, having a little bit more trouble lifting a leg, or why people develop pain in their knees or pain in their hips is simply due to subtle winds absorbing, dissolving, a natural process. A natural process. Can you slow down that process? I think from general exercise and movement, people slow it down, but it's going to happen at some point. But there's no reason not to go into older age, more limber and able to move more. It's just going to support your activities of your mind more readily. And then what happens is the body is based on 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. Earth, water, fire, and wind or air, okay, which makes our bodies, we understand, earth is like the matter of our body. This is like the earth element. And then we've got water. We know we have fluids running through the body. We can't live without that, blood and water and things. Air, of course, we wouldn't be able to breathe. And fire is all the heat that keeps the heat in the body that we need as mammals to survive. It also helps us digest food, things like that. So everything has a function and a balance. And the reason we get disease is one of those elements goes out of balance. So for instance, if you have an imbalance in the wind element, you might be susceptible to asthma or lung diseases, might have difficulty breathing, things like that. Some people have issues with the earth element and they might have skin issues like that. So there's all kinds of things we know when things get out of balance, when you get a cold and the fluids in the body are out of balance. Okay? And when you actually actively start dying, these elements start absorbing, and these are the inner visions that accompany the absorption on a more subtle level until you get to the most subtle experience of the mind. So what first happens is the earth element dissolves. And when the earth element dissolves, the body becomes very thin, the limbs are loose, and you feel as if your body is sinking under the earth. Now, this may come to you before you're on your deathbed, but I do know some people that have been dying that describe this to me. This is how they felt. It's very normal. So the thing is, if you're aware of this when it's happening, there's less fear. If you've never thought about it and didn't know, it would be a lot of fear that you feel leaden and you can't move. But you certainly know people in their active dying process will be unable to lift up their head, maybe unable to speak or turn their head or chew food or something. Because the earth element, this physical structure is not functioning as well anymore. The aggregate of form absorbs. So again, the body is made up of 5 aggregates. Aggregate means collection. 1 form element, the body, and 4 mental aggregates that make up the mind. So the first thing with earth, the form aggregate begins to absorb. The limbs may become smaller, the body becomes weak, powerless. It loses its luster, okay? And then there's also wisdoms associated with more of a realized consciousness. So a mirror-like wisdom dissolves, and your sight may become unclear and dark. The eye sense, you might have an inability to open or close your eyes, and this is the internal sign that will appear to your mind or your consciousness. A mirage-like image. A mirage-like image. So I'll give you an example. In tantric practices, these 8 visions come up in tantric practice. And we do them, and in my practices, I do them several times a day. They come up in the practices. The more slowly you can do them, it familiarizes your mind with visions that are going to appear for you when you die. If I can recognize some of those visions because my mind is familiar with them, then I might be able to recognize the clear light when it dawns and be able to use that, utilize that to access higher states of realization when I'm dying. So the first thing would be a mirage-like image, as if you're looking off into the distance at a hot roadway, right? And you see water, and you might see water everywhere around you, or that shimmering waves that you see with the heat that looks like water. And that's your entire experience. So when you're meditating on this, even in your practices, I know His Holiness the Dalai Lama says he does it, again, 6 or 8 times a day because it comes in certain practices. Try to do it slowly. So I'm merging my mind in this meditation with this mirage-like vision. And that's all there is. It's not separate from me. I'm not looking at it. It is my mind. Because when you actually are able in higher level practices to bring the winds from the side channels, entering the central channel in the right way, those visions appear automatically. That will be your experience. Okay? And it can also be very blissful. Okay? So the next thing that happens, the next element, the water element dissolves. Saliva, sweat, urine, blood, all the water elements in the body dry up. The aggregate of feeling, this is the first aggregate of the mind, feeling, absorbs. The body consciousness can no longer experience basic feelings, the 3 types of feelings. I don't mean emotion, I mean pain, pleasure, neutral. That's how we define feeling with this aggregate of feeling in the Tibetan system. Pain, pleasure, or neutral. I won't be able to discern that anymore. Okay. The basic wisdom of equality, our ordinary consciousness that's mindful of pain, pleasure, neutral, dissolves. And I'm no longer mindful of feelings like that, okay? The ear sense starts to not function. I may not hear any more external or internal sounds. And this is the vision that you want to focus on in the meditation. A smoke-like vision, like I'm in a room filled with blue-gray smoke, and that's my entire experience. Then the fire element dissolves. I no longer can digest food or drink. The mental aggregate of discrimination absorbs. I'm no longer mindful of any close people around me or the affairs of people like that. I can no longer remember the name of people closest to me. And the sense of smell starts to weaken or go. And then what happens is the exhalations become stronger at this point. So you may still be clinically alive like that, but the exhalation becomes stronger, the inhalation weaker. And the internal sign to meditate on is an appearance of fireflies in a night sky, or as if you're at a campfire and suddenly a breeze comes and sparks fly up into the air. And that's your entire vision, is a spark-like sky. Then the wind element dissolves. And what happens is the winds from above and below start to move to the heart center, again, the heart chakra. And this is when the inhalation and exhalation would cease. And the breathing tends to stop there when we would be declared clinically dead. The aggregate, the mental aggregate of compositional factors absorbs. So you can no longer do anything physical. Basic wisdom of achieving dissolves, achieving activities, and you're no longer mindful of anything external. The tongue, your sense of taste dissolves. The tongue may become thick and short. The root of the tongue can become blue. And the internal sign you would meditate on is the glow around a candle before it's about to burn out. So like a flickering candle, that light around it just before it's about to burn out is your entire experience, not separate from your mind. And then you get into the more subtle consciousness. And so the dissolution, fifth to the eighth signs, the aggregate of consciousness absorbs. This is the last of the mental aggregates. 80 conceptions dissolve that make up your being, okay? And what comes is the winds in the right and left channels above the heart enter the central channel here. So you've got a central channel like a straw of light, and that's about the diameter of a drinking straw that runs basically from your third eye up, curls around to the crown chakra, goes all the way back down, your spine slowly closer to your spine, all the way down where the lower end of it is about 4 finger widths like this below your navel. That's the bottom end, all the way down by your navel. And then it's got 2 side channels that run along the side, half the diameter of the central channel. Central channel's kind of translucent white, translucent blue. The right channel is kind of red translucent, the left channel translucent white. Again, half the diameter of a drinking straw, the side channels. Their lower ends curl, the 4 finger widths below the navel, curl into the central channel. So you can imagine that, and what will happen is, now I've got entering here, this first dissolution, more subtle dissolution, the winds in the right, left channels above the heart, the upward moving winds enter the central channel at the top of the heart and start to descend through the central channel. And the vision here is like the glow of a harvest moon, a full moon rising over a harvested field, a milky white light. This is not clear light. This is a milky white. They call it a white appearance. A white appearance is your entire experience. More subtle consciousness absorbing. Then when the mind of white appearance dissolves, the winds in the right and left channels below the heart enter the central channel at the base of the spine, so that lower opening. And your inner vision is basically a brilliant red, orange, magenta sunset. That's your entire experience, called a red increase. As those winds begin to come up from the lower opening. Everything now coming in like this to the heart center, okay? The white from above, the red from below. So red increase, and then I come to the black near attainment. This is like a dead faint, as black can be when all the winds merge. Okay, in the left and right channels, below the heart, the winds gather at the heart as the black near attainment comes. The internal sign, again, is this thick darkness, as if swooning into unconsciousness. That's your whole experience, just before the clear light dawns, okay? And then all the winds dissolve into the very subtle life-bearing wind that's in the indestructible drop at the heart. And there, again, is the most subtle mind mounted on that. But everything dissolving, all those winds from the body's dying, absorbed into that most subtle wind in the indestructible drop in the heart center. And that is when the mind of clear light dawns. And you want to focus on that as long as is possible. So the more we're able to recognize the visions, the more we're going to be able to see the clear light and be able to do meditations at that point. For great yogis or yoginis, they may stay in that meditative state. It could be for some days, some weeks, and the body doesn't decay as long as they're in that meditation. For ordinary beings, it takes normally up to 3 days for the consciousness to leave the body. According to Tibetan tradition, when all the winds merge there, in the indestructible drop at the heart, okay, and all the winds absorb into that most subtle wind, eventually there's nothing more to support that most subtle wind there, because it's the basis of the body, and the body has degenerated enough. So what happens is the indestructible heart drop at the heart opens, and that most subtle wind leaves the body, but the mind is mounted on it. Most subtle, clear light nature of mind is mounted. So then they'll say the consciousness leaves the body. And that most subtle wind turns into, in a sense, like a bardo being's body. Bardo simply means, in Sanskrit, in between. It's a transition between lives, in between. And you go off with the bardo being's body, with the most subtle mind and all those seeds you have in there, propelling you, and for us, catapulting us uncontrollably through a transition until the right conditions come together for us to take rebirth, based on what those karmic seeds indicate, what kind of causes and conditions. We can't do it with control. We do it uncontrollably. And they say every 7 days in the bardo, you go through another mini death or mini transition, up to 49 days when you will absolutely take another rebirth. That's the system, according to the Tibetan Buddhist belief, of how you get out of the body and into the next rebirth. So one time we hosted Robert Thurman when I was running a center in California, and he had a new book out, a new translation on it's really called the Tibetan Book of the In-Between. They call it the Tibetan Book of Death or something. And he said, when he described this process, and he said, so there really are no dead people. You're either in this life, you're in an in-between state, or you're in the next life. So what happens is, because we lose people, and that means that when their breathing stops and that transition puts them into a different realm, we miss them. But the more you have a belief in reincarnation, you realize they're just someplace else. We would like them to be with us. And I know recently I had a Hindu friend, years ago, a Hindu boyfriend, and he passed away. I went to Florida and I ran into somebody that knew him, and I found out that he had passed away quite young, in his 50s. And I immediately, when I heard, we have a normal response of like, oh my gosh, like how sad. And then the guy that was talking to me, who's a Hindu practitioner and pretty neat guy. And he looked at me and he said, well, he's just somewhere else now. And I remember thinking like, oh yeah, I guess so. Like, I hope it's a good place. But the scary part comes for us is it's unknown. As long as we're not highly realized, we don't know where we're going. We can't control that, where we're going. And we're quite concerned that it's going to be worse than the slot we got this life. So what we can do right now, the only thing you can do to prevent that, to create great causes for your next rebirth, things like that, is to practice Dharma. Like, it seems so clear and so apparent, is to practice Dharma. Okay? And one thing I wanted to mention about these visions, when you take rebirth, okay, when you finally leave the bardo, the in-between state, the conditions have come together, 49 days have passed or prior to that, and you take rebirth, and let's say you're reincarnated as a human, and sperm and egg come together, there's a fertilization process, boom, right there, the mind is there with the most subtle mind, most subtle wind is there, okay? And what happens is and then you start forming again, so those visions I just mentioned go in reverse. So you come out of the clear light to the black near attainment, to the red increase, white appearance, and then the glow around the butter lamp or the candle flickering going out, fireflies, smoke-filled room, mirage-like vision, grosser consciousness starts to manifest like that. And then we forget about those visions. We forget. So what happens is these visions are happening for you now. They happen every time you fall asleep. They happen in reverse every time you wake up, which are like a mini death and a mini reawakening. They happen when you have a really, really big yawn or a big sneeze, and they happen when you have sexual orgasm. Are you recognizing those visions now? So if not, we could use some practice on them, and that's why we do meditation on them. Okay, so let's do some meditation just to familiarize you a little bit with these visions, okay? Find a comfortable position. And you can lightly close your eyes. And just bring your awareness first to your breath, just to settle the mind. So I mentioned the easiest way to do death meditation is considering this is our last day, or could be our last day. Another way to do death meditation, a little bit longer, is the 9-point death meditation. The 3 roots with the 3 reasonings under each and the 3 resolutions it brings you to. And you don't have to do all of those points in one meditation. You can break it up. But it's very powerful. If you spend a week, for instance, on 3 of the reasonings and another week on another of the 3 and another week, over and over, to really grab and feel this realization that you're going to die. You don't know when that will be. And the best thing that benefits you is some sort of spiritual practice. But another meditation you could do on death, which is longer, is to visualize your own death slowly. But rather than leaving things for you, which could be in a very somber, depressed state, Although that is a natural byproduct when you are meditating on death, it does bring the mind down a little bit, which is humbling, which we need. Is at the end of that meditation, I like to focus on the visions that happen at the death time. So imagine you're lying in a bed dying, and you're really at the very end now, and everything has let go. You've gone through the various stages of death, of being angry and bartering, depression, and coming to a level of acceptance. And you want to make the most of this opportunity now. You can't stop it. It is a natural process. The body is feeling weak as the earth element dissolves, and I'm unable to lift my head or lift my limbs. I feel like I'm being buried by earth. Instead of panicking, imagine a mirage-like image. Shimmering waves from heat on a hot asphalt that looks like water. Imagine the water around you. This is not separate from your mind. This is your mind. This is your whole experience. A mirage-like image. Focus on that as much as you can. And think with the corner of your mind, I will not miss the clear light. I will not miss the clear light. The water element dissolves. The fluids dry up in the body. There's no ability anymore to distinguish between pain, pleasure, or a neutral feeling. Unable to hear now as well. The ear consciousness is going. And what appears is a smoke-filled room, an internal vision of a room filled with blue-gray smoke. This is my entire experience. Focus there as best as you can. Smoke-filled room. The fire element dissolves. The heat begins to move from the extremities and your head to the heart center. Sense of smell is gone. And the internal vision that comes is fireflies or sparks in a night sky. And that's your entire experience, not separate from your mind. And just think, I'm not going to miss the clear light. The wind element dissolves when our breathing may cease, if it hasn't already. And the winds move, 10 winds move to the heart. The mental aggregate of compositional factors absorbs. You are done with external worldly activities or consciousness. Sense of taste dissolves. And you have an internal appearance of a glow around a flickering candle before it goes out. Focus on that. That's your entire experience. And now the more subtle winds dissolving, more subtle consciousness dissolving as the winds from above, from the right and left channels, enter above the heart, enter the central channel at the top of the head. Inside, there is an internal vision of a white appearance, as if you're looking across a harvested field on a full moon night. Milky white experience is your entire vision. Focus on that and think with a part of your mind, I am not going to miss the clear light. And as the winds below the heart now begin to enter the central channel at the base of the spine, coming up with a red increase, merging up to the heart center, there's a red increase as if a brilliant red, orange, magenta sunset. That's your entire experience, not separate from the mind. There's a black near attainment when the winds from above and below merge in the indestructible drop at the heart into that most absorbent and that most subtle wind, black as black can be. This is the last vision before the clear light dawns, so just think, I am not going to miss the clear light. And then the clear light dawns, most luminous, pure experience you can imagine. Unfettered by any concepts, any constraints, any feeling you get of yourself arising, for instance, I, the sense of yourself, that there's something there in this space, that concrete notion of I, that feeling of something there existing from its own side that is me, that doesn't exist at all. That does not exist at all. That notion is absent of that. It lacks any concrete, independent nature from its own side, with its own character, with any inherence at all. It lacks that. It's empty of that. Focus on that absence as best as you can, the not finding. Again, any concrete notion you have of me, myself arising, does not exist at all. It's a complete hallucination. As Rinpoche says, that is decorated by our ignorance. Decorated by our ignorance, the sense of me that I then label Steve, Sheila, Elizabeth, Jennifer. That doesn't exist at all. But do know that you do exist on a conventional level. You do exist on a conventional level that you must take care of. But how do you exist? In relation to all things, by depending on other things to exist, not independently. The only way we can exist is by depending on body and mind, on our body and mind. And we depend on a great deal of other things as well in order to exist. So again, we need to take care of ourselves, but in perspective, in relation to understanding our interconnectedness with all things and all beings. Then we can live more harmoniously on the planet. So please relax. Take a couple of deep breaths and just reflect on the meditation. Anything that's arising in your mind right now, in your body, just observe. When you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes. Any questions or comments? From the meditation, or Steve?
Yeah. What if you, I don't know if it's possible, what if you miss the light? And she kept saying that, in fact, when I was doing that, that would come up. It was almost like, almost a bit of a stressor in a sense. Do people miss the light? Or, I mean, look.
We miss the light all the time, don't we? Are you recognizing it when you fall asleep? Right. What will happen is you're going to be catapulted anyway into the in-between state. And I'll put it this way, because I am now a believer in reincarnation, I've been catapulted through it countless times, and I've made it through, and I really made it through this time with a fantastic situation. So I want to keep making imprints while I can in this fantastic situation, so that I can ensure that it's going to just get better and better and better of every lifetime. And the thing is, I don't know what will be, but for me to just be paralyzed with fear about it isn't really going to help right now. It's not going to help me or anyone. So we just have to kind of get on with it and do our best, right?
Right. Yeah, I saw a film on Buddha. I'm taking a Buddhism class. That's how I found you, by the way, with Pamela Patton.
Great. Yes. Yeah.
So in fact, from Margot, actually. And the film just showed, of course, you've probably seen it. It's where when he's sitting under the Bodhi tree, and just as he's about to come to enlightenment, he goes through all his past lives. He remembers them. Is that how you know you're coming to enlightenment? That in your living moment, you remember all your past lives, whatever they are?
I don't know, because I'm not at that stage. I couldn't say.
And also, you could actually be born, and you can come out in Buddhism. You believe that you can come out anything. You'd be an insect, an animal,
Yep.
So I can't say when I'm in the light, please put me into a nice, middle class, whatever family, and at least let me be born human than a bug.
The thing is, you can make prayers every day of what kind of rebirth you want to have. Put it out there. I make dedications that, please, if I can't get enlightened in this life, can it happen for me in the in-between state, that I can do that and go to a pure realm where I could do it more quickly. If I can't do that, then please make sure I take a precious human rebirth, a good rebirth, and I have very specific things about that rebirth that I want. Put it out there. Create the cause. Create the cause.
Control of that rebirth. Is there a high? Because I know there's no higher power. In other words, you're thinking it, but it sounds like it could be. It's very random, like randomized numbers. It could be a billion things.
Buddhism, we don't have any randomness. It's all cause and effect. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. Cause and effect. If you create the cause, the result will happen. If the cause is not there, the result will not happen. There's nothing random about it. The only way things happen is there was a cause creating it.
That means, can I say that?
Go ahead.
That means if you're good in this life, so that for sure you're gonna be really even better in next life. But if you suffer more in the next life, that's.
Well, the thing is, because we've had countless lives in Buddhism, because there's no beginning to the mind, because what we think of as the beginning will also have a previous moment that caused it. There'll always be a preceding moment. I'm not going to go heavily into that now, because this isn't a course about the mind, but basically we've had countless rebirths in Buddhism, because there's no beginning to the mind. So I have other imprints in there that may not be as a life of a nun for me. Because we have countless lives, we've been all things before. We've been murderers, we've been saints, we've been monks and nuns and good people and bad people, and all of that's rolled in. So all I can do right now is purify what went on before that I know or don't know, clean it up, and also right now create the conditions to move forward in a most beneficial way. That's mostly what we're doing right now on this path. And granted, we have a variety of practices in order to do that. So classes are helpful, meditation is helpful, doing some retreat is helpful, discussion with your friends and different things. There's a lot of different varieties of things we can do. So that's pretty much what we're doing. I just want to move on a little bit, but are there any other comments about questions from the meditation, or yes?
Hi.
Yeah, what's your name?
This is Walker and Lisa.
Walker and Lisa, fantastic, great.
Um,
Great to see you guys, my old friends from California.
I will not miss the clear light is really helpful. Just keep that there. In my meditation there, I actually sort of concretized it, which wasn't good, but I saw it as a post-it. I kept coming back and saying, oh, there's that post-it. What does it say? I will not miss the clear light. Coming back to it. But then we got to the end and you sort of said, okay, there's no I. I had to go back and cross out the I, on the post-it. Anyway, does the I just go away at that last stage, or really, if you're more skillful, you try not to be attached to the I at the earlier stages, of that transition?
Well, the problem, I believe, is the I doesn't go away for ordinary thinkers. The I is there. The I rolls right through our Bardo experience, and usually it's with a lot of gripping and pain and confusion.
Right.
Right. So the more we can do meditation on emptiness,
Mm-hmm.
to dissolve a little bit, chip away, dissolve the edges of things that, and the ways I really like to work with it, if I get irritated, if I get very fearful in just everyday life, something comes up and you go, then, oh, there's the I. Whoa. Okay, thanks very much. And then I want to use it in meditation again and again to say, well, wow, that felt really strong. Let me analyze and see what's going on there.
Like a wheel of sharp weapons, kind of,
You can. I mean, that's one way. That's also on a bodhicitta level as well, but really doing a 4-part analysis of standard emptiness meditation. Like there is one on my website I lead. I could send you the link. And Rinpoche leads, the most fantastic ones, of course. So, but again, the more we can do that now in our lives now, that's what's really going to help us at the death time, because that dissolves all the fear. That takes away all the stuff. When I realize, like, wow, that thing that all I'm doing is bolstering it up every moment, protecting it. It's the center of my universe. I'm more important than anything else. Anything that threatens this, whether somebody threatens your kid, you see the I.
Right.
Somebody dings your car in a parking lot. For some people, the I is on their car. I've seen people rushing out after the person, hey, my car. Like, boy, there's an I. Big 2-ton I right there. And you go, what? Like, are you going to be dying like that? And there are people that die like that, freaked out, grasping on. No, you're not getting the house. You're not getting their eye is all over everything. It's a mess. So the more right now we know this, a lot of us know this, get your classes on emptiness, read your books on emptiness, start penetrating, start understanding how to meditate on emptiness, this lack of concrete nature. I haven't found it in any other tradition, is going to basically put your eye in a very balanced place, realizing the interconnectedness. And then what that does for my everyday life is that necessitates and basically supports me to be kinder to myself and others, supports me to be gentler, because I know that this is all connected and my eye doesn't exist in this overinflated way that I feel it is at times. So I'm going to want to be gentle and kind and all these things, because I understand there's an interrelation with everything. And I don't want to be vomiting all my junk over on everybody else, because I'm going to carry that into future lives and it's going to affect good rebirths.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm wondering if this sort of fascination that we have with primordial images like the orange setting sun, the milky fields, sparkling fireflies and all that are, and also maybe a discomfort with sort of the darkest darkness is a manifestation of these faint imprints, of distant memories that we've undergone countless times. I mean, maybe there's some correlation there.
Well, definitely there is. I mean, that's why those visions are there. That's what happens, apparently, according to
Mhm.
the Buddha. That's what, and people I know that bring the winds in, that's what they see. That's what they experience.
Mhm.
So obviously it must be a primordial sense of that. And we've also been through it countless times. And again, we go through it every time we fall asleep at night. And it, you know, like it's happening all the time. We're just not recognizing the vision. So again, through more and more meditation, can we start to try to notice? I sometimes, when I'm falling asleep at night, lying there, I try to get that very, like you're just about to drift off, and to kind of get a sense of what am I experiencing right there. It's really hard. I can't really do it, but I try to think about it.
Mhm.
So again, we can only do the best we can, like that. But what's happened right now in our culture is there's so many distractions and other things, and this is the degenerate time. So these are some of the symptoms that are going to get worse of, you know, I think our phones and technology didn't really help, of how to lessen our dependence on that to keep things simpler in your life so that you can stay connected to your meditation practice, a good meditation practice like that.
Thank you.
Sure. Was there one more question, or
Hi there.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I had a question about how the throwing karma works. Like, if the karma is if the imprints are in the subtle consciousness, but they say at a gross level, you know, think good thoughts before your death, what's the link between the gross consciousness, which dissolves, and then the subtle consciousness? And what are the main factors that force a karmic imprint to ripen?
So we're going to talk a little more about that tomorrow. The throwing karma is what will catapult you into the next rebirth, what type of rebirth. So I suppose they must be, well, it's actually whatever could be stronger at the time of death. So if there is some really positive thing in there, in the most subtle consciousness of those seeds, something that's accessing more quickly than that's positive, that's going to put you into a good rebirth, I would imagine, if that's what you're asking. You know, it's obviously what's strongest, they say, at the time of death.
Yeah, and I guess my question is, do we have any conscious control over that if our gross mind dissolves at the time of death?
Not for ordinary people, usually not. And the thing with karma that's even hard to answer that question properly that you just asked is, what we're going to understand tomorrow are some basic principles of karma, but you need a highly realized mind to understand the intricacies. So you might say, okay, the gross mind dissolved. Then in the subtle consciousness, there are these imprints. So how is it that how do we know which one dictates? Is that what you're saying? Like, that's going to throw us into the work? You need a highly realized consciousness to know why that one ripened, why that one was the one that, you know. So I couldn't say which one. That's a great question for Rinpoche. And I've asked some lamas things like that, and I haven't really gotten a satisfactory answer of, you know, sometimes they're very enigmatic how they answer. And so that's very hard. At our ordinary level, we wouldn't be able to control it, number one, and we wouldn't really know. I couldn't answer. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know like that.
Thank you.
So let's go on a little bit. In fact, what I'm thinking to do is let's take a break, 10 minutes. And again, in the break time, let's use it, because let's say this is a mini retreat, okay? Any kind of retreat, your break times are almost more important than your actual session. Because what happens, we take a break and the mind goes right back to some ordinary place. What I'd like you to do is, as whatever activity you're doing, 10 minutes to reflect on the visions. Try to go back and remember what it felt like. Try to place your mind a little bit in that. You know, or take a moment to reflect that as if you're on your dying bed. You know, what kind of experience do I want arising for me at that time? How do I think my mind's going to be at that time if it was going to happen tomorrow? Am I ready? Okay, 10 minutes. Okay, we are going to go on to more practical exercises because we've just got about half an hour or so left. of what do we actually do with our caring for someone else and getting ourselves ready. So I want to talk about that. And I want to reference a bit from, this is an older book. There's so many books on death and dying. And if you also check the FPMT website, the website of our organization, fpmt.org, and go to education materials, there are more materials on death and dying than it seems any other topic. So it tells you the importance. So it's not that we are only about death and dying, but a lot of what we're doing is a preparation to have as peaceful a death as possible, but to really do the most you can in life so that the death time is an opportunity for you to progress to higher states of realization where you're going to be better able to help all living beings. That's the purpose in our tradition. So this older book, Facing Death and Finding Hope, I've always really liked. It was one of the earlier books out there by Christine Longacre, who is a student of Sogyal Rinpoche, or was a student of Sogyal Rinpoche. Facing Death and Finding Hope was about her husband's diagnosis of leukemia to when he died a year later. And when it was written, it was at a time when the healthcare industry was not really clear how to deal in an effective way with people that were dying and how to speak to them. And so she brings up 4 tasks of living and dying in this book that I really like. 4 tasks of living and dying. Some of these we've talked about already, but one of them is understanding and transforming suffering. Now, when we have longer courses on death and dying or retreats, we spend some time meditating on impermanence to start and talking about impermanence for one, change. So again, if you can look at your own relationship with change, are you pretty good when things change? People change plans. There's some people I know with the COVID virus, the quarantine, the pandemic, they just kind of rolled with it. Whatever happens, their business had to close. They're kind of dealing with the employees, and then they dealt with some loans, and then they're home setting up a workspace at home, and then they're dealing with their kids, getting through school. And some people really just kind of rolled, and some people resisted at every single turn there was, and they're not doing that well. And I live in a suburban neighborhood of Philadelphia, and I'm really impressed. I'm very close with my neighbors, and the neighbors on this side. And so the couple are a younger generation, the next generation younger than me, but they live with their dad, the guy's dad, that I grew up with. They moved into that house when I was 14. So I've known the dad for years. He's now in his 80s, but the younger son lives there. He must be 40, I'm guessing, and his wife, and I'm really close with his wife. And each year they rent a beach house for a week. And so, you know, she's working, they're both working at home. They have 2 kids, young kids. It's been very challenging. And she said, you know, we realize we're not going to go to the beach. We're not doing any holidays this year. So they put in a pool, an above ground pool, and they did some work around the house. And the pool has been brilliant because there's 9 children that live on this side of the street that I live in between. And everybody's been enjoying. And they just kind of roll with it. They're like, okay, we're just going to do this now. Nothing else to do. And then their little girl had a birthday, and then they manage that with people driving by, and they just roll, and they're really pleasant, and they're just making the most of it. You know, they're like, they said, what else are we going to do? So people adapt, and some people don't, but you need to understand your own relationship with suffering. How does it work for you? Are you pretty good with stuff like that? And when you become ill with something, are you a pretty good patient? Do you do the things you're supposed to do, or is it constantly a problem? Everything's a problem. So again, you're going to learn first to cope with the small changes and the small suffering in your life. Get experience with that, practice with that, because then when a bigger change comes, like the loss of a loved one, definitely your own death, you'll be experienced with change. You'll be accepting, you'll realize, okay, this is what's happening. I was amazed at my father a year ago. how present and adaptive he was in his dying process, in his aging process, and then his dying process, and how much more pleasant it made it for all of us around him, as opposed to some people I know that resisted every step of the way. The second task she lists is making a connection, healing relationships, and letting go. We've talked a little bit about this, but this is right now communicating as clearly, openly, and compassionately as I can in everyday life, in the present right now, and then skillfully with people, right? And then also, can I clear up any unresolved problems with people that have gone on in as calm a way? There are some people that may not want to clear up those problems with you. They're not interested. So can I then find a way? I've at least tried. They're not interested. Can I find a way to let go and release myself from the hold of it? That's important too. Number 3, cultivating a spiritual practice. We've been talking about this throughout the whole day. I think you're pretty understanding of that. Find a way, please. I can't really recommend, whether you're Buddhist or not, to get some sort of meditation practice set up for yourself. There's a lot of things all over the internet. People showing you basic meditation, some way to be quiet and still with yourself a little bit every day, some space like that. And if you find it's beneficial, I would grow that space for yourself. Find a way to cultivate. There's many meditations, many things. In fact, I'm going to lead in August for Shantideva Center Meditation 101. So we're going to talk about from the ground up, nuts and bolts. How do I get it set up? Where am I sitting? What do I do for an altar? Do I need that? How do I do it? How do I start? And all of that, just to get, it's also a great refresher sometimes when we've strayed from our meditation. Just, I like to go back to the basics sometimes. It's fantastic. Number 4, finding meaning in life. 4th task, finding meaning in life. Super important. When you don't have a clear idea of your purpose, it can lend to a lot of agitation and misery for you. So when I say meaning, for me, what it means is, what is the thing that lights you up from the inside? When there's certain times you're doing something, you're engaged with someone or something, and it just feels really good from the inside out. Like you're in sync, or you're enjoying it, or you're thinking, this is neat, I like this. Then go in that direction. Go in that direction and get more of it. As long as it's a healthy, constructive, beneficial thing, not harming anyone, right? Go more in that direction. Don't get too mired in, I don't know if I'll be able to make a living doing this. Then simplify your life. It's much more important to do, not only to do what you love, be where you love. Be what is working for you, what you're feeling that you're manifesting yourself as wholeheartedly as possible. And figure out early on, figure out now, don't wait anymore. What is it that does that for me? It could be small things. Build more of those into your life. Build more of those into your life. Sometimes I explore, honestly, through volunteering. The different periods of my life when I was an active volunteer, I got back to volunteering again because I'm home now. So I'm a better volunteer than when I was on the road. And I find it really exposes me to different organizations, different tasks, different people. And you can so much give back through different agencies that need help like that. So many things you can volunteer for right now. So that's been always giving me a little juice to kind of, if you're not clear what you're doing, like that. The next thing I want to talk about are, okay, let me go through some other things, then I'm going to go through, do you have your paperwork ready? But let me talk about organ donation. This is a personal decision. And there's no good or bad or right or wrong about it. It's totally up to you. If you have a motivation and you are young enough or feel that your body could be useful and you really want to donate your organs, feel free, make that known to people around you. There's things you can put that dot on your license. If you have a driver's license, there's different ways to do that. For great meditators, honestly, they tend to not be organ donors. Part of the reason is when they get the organs, they need to harvest them right away after you die. Buddhists prefer to leave the body, if you can, for up to 3 days to allow the consciousness to naturally leave, okay? Even if there's an accident or a heart attack or something. Ideally, unless you've heard a lama say it's okay, you can remove the body, but mainly we try to leave the body for 3 days. So in your own instructions, or if you're caring for someone else, if they're Buddhist or not, it's a personal decision. But often meditators feel like they're cutting across, and the consciousness will leave anyway, okay? If your motivation is so pure, I don't think it'll make a difference, but a lot of great meditators want to stay in that meditative space to actualize more highly realized states. So they don't want to have any disruption right away like that. So they may choose not to donate organs. But in your own paperwork, in your own preparation, it's good to let others closest to you know, just verbalize it and say, I don't want to donate my organs, or I'm really interested in organ donation, even if you don't formalize it in writing. And the reason is a friend of mine, her husband died years ago, member of Vajrapani, and he died suddenly, fell off a roof and died within like 15 minutes or so, and was 40, and the hospital, there they were at the hospital, was horrible. And the hospital was, said to her, they had that discussion, that horrible discussion they have to have of, was he interested in donating organs? And meanwhile, you're in shock, and, but they came and they asked her, and she didn't know what to do, and she didn't know what he wanted. They'd never discussed it. So at the very last minute, she said, no, I don't want to donate his organs. And then about 2 months later, she was cleaning out some of his stuff at their house and found his wallet, a wallet that had a piece of paper in it that said, I do not want my organs donated. So imagine had she donated them, how she would have felt. So make it known to those around you, just quickly what you want. And then in your own thing with other people, if you're taking care of someone, Buddhist or not, okay, you can only do the best you can as far as what circumstance they died in. Did they die in a hospice? Did they die in a hospital? Did they die in a nursing convalescent center or at home? And only through that are you able to control how long you can leave the body. You may want to discuss it with a facility before you enter into that facility with the person or yourself. Would it be an option? Is there a place where we can leave the body for up to 3 days? Some places will say no. You might discuss it with a funeral home, something like that. A lot of hospitals now, the experience I had with my mother, my grandmother, my father, they were enormously respectful, and they basically just said, take all the time you like, but we didn't go into extra days, because I knew for my mother and grandmother that was not going to be comfortable for my family. So I basically did the practices I knew how to do, contacted some high lamas, who then gave me permission and said, yep, you can remove the body now. And then I called the funeral home, like that. So, but I was allowed hours in the room with them. Nobody bothered, nobody came in or out. Once they unplug the person, if the person is plugged up, they might say, okay, we just need 5 minutes to get them ready, and they'll disconnect everything from them, and then they'll leave the room, and they will leave you alone in the room. Nobody came in or out. There's no reason. They're not caring for anyone anymore, like that. One place rolled in a cart of refreshments and sandwiches. I could have camped out in the room. I couldn't believe how kind, how thoughtful. But again, get clear before that. Don't, a lot of stuff happens in an emergency. Make sure you might want to know. So euthanasia, this involves our pets as well, usually the ones we euthanize. Buddhists don't tend to euthanize pets. This is hard. The motivation, almost everyone I know that's euthanized a pet has been to stop the pet's suffering. Of course, everyone has a very good motivation. What we would do in Buddhism, and some people find this harsh, is I've gotten sleeping pills, I've gotten pain meds for animals, given it to them, it doesn't kill them, it can make them comfortable, let them use up the animal rebirth. Let them pass away naturally, because we don't know what we're interrupting. And it might be better if they have 3 weeks in the suffering life as a dog to clear that out and finish it, other than us interrupting it. And then they still have to come back and take rebirth as some sick child or something and die quickly. So unless you know the mind of the person, unless you're highly realized and know the mind of the being, we tend to not euthanize. But again, with certain people I know in the hospital, people have been able to check with Lama Zopa Rinpoche or a high lama. And based on the karma of the person, he said different things to people. So one family, the older father had a heart attack, was not expected to recover or even come out of a coma. And Rinpoche said in that case, he did not need to be on life support. It was okay to unplug the life support, take him off, get the family around, say goodbye. And he lived 24 more hours and then he passed away peacefully. All the family was there, Rinpoche's instruction. Another man at 40 years old was dying of colon cancer. And Rinpoche, for some reason, he was consulted and he said to leave him on life support as long as possible. So maybe Rinpoche saw him taking a worse rebirth, felt like let him continue to purify through the situation, the cancer. It's hard, but that was Rinpoche's instructions. So again, if you have the luxury to consult with someone you believe, you have faith, has higher realizations, that could be helpful, provided you're ready to follow the advice. Don't ask unless you're ready to follow the advice. Grief counseling is enormously helpful. I would highly recommend it, especially in the case of losing a child or losing someone suddenly or losing someone to suicide. I think it's really helpful for the family, for any children left, if you can have, but specific grief counseling. Not necessarily just counseling. Grief counseling is slightly different. And understand there is a period of grief. And the normal cycle, meaning an older person dies, somebody dies of cancer over a long period of time. The normal grief cycle is about 2 years. But there's no exact time for it. However, what's important, and if it's a sudden death, if it's a suicide or the death of a child, the grief cycle could be longer. But the important thing to know is the grief ends. So I do know people that continue to hold themselves a victim to the grief of losing a child like 20 years before. It's helpful to know the grief can end if you choose to end it, and you can move on and have a full life, which is probably what the dying person, the deceased person, would have wanted for you. So that's important to know, but it is important to go through a grieving process. And different spiritualities and different religions have some really valuable grieving processes. I find the Jewish religion has this period of Shiva, where you sit for 7 days, Shiva, to sit, and you sit to mourn. And people visit your home to do prayers with you. And when they visit, they bring food for you to eat. So you don't have to cook or worry about any logistical thing. All you have to do is tell stories about the deceased, cry, feel the grief, really go through it, because it's really a healing process. I find it a really beneficial process, the Jewish Shiva practice. And I've often gone to people's homes to be with them, to bring food, to recite prayers with them, like that. Suicide is obviously in Buddhism seen as something very, very sad. It is destroying a life. You are harming taking a life. The thing is, it doesn't have, as we're going to explore tomorrow, it doesn't have the 4 components that make it a heavy killing karma, because one of the components is, with killing, the person you intend to kill has to die before you do, and in suicide you die at the same time. But it's seen as a very negative, harmful experience that sometimes creates a cycle of you suiciding again and again in future lives, like that. So not something we'd recommend, even in the face of tremendous pain and suffering and cancer like that. We would try to make you as comfortable as possible until you naturally pass away, which I know is really hard sometimes on the family as well. What's helpful practices to do if you're a Buddhist. Practices to do would be medicine Buddha practice. To read that practice in English takes about 45 minutes to an hour with some mantra recitation. You're reciting a sacred saying and doing a visualization with that. Very, very powerful practice is one of the main things we do. But there's a number of other mantras you can recite, prayers you can say. These are all contained in a wonderful book now that's come out. Wisdom Publications has also reissued another version of that book, but there's a book about how to enjoy death that Venerable Rabina edited. It's really great, and it has everything in there, and I think the wisdom book's similar. And this is kind of something I grab if somebody needs me to do last rites for Buddhists. I also have holy water and Kala Chakra sand and all these little substances that I bring to the people, special mantras, and then I can just start reading from the book as much as I want. You can also read those practices away from the person. If they're at a caretaker's, a funeral home, if they're already at the crematorium, wherever you're taking them to and you're away from them, you can do those practices in your own home. That's fine. And you can also do them after they've died, when they're sick, and after they've been buried or cremated. Absolutely. So there's a number of different Buddhist rituals. If the person is not Buddhist, and you're Buddhist, let's say, what I would do is respect whatever belief system they have or don't have. I don't come in with my Buddhist pictures. I first try to, when I did a lot of hospice work, I would first try to ask the person if they're still conscious. Do they have any particular belief system, anything that they're interested in my providing? Because now as a nun, that's more of what I'm providing. But before as a hospice worker, I was doing it when I wasn't a nun and was a new Buddhist, so I wasn't really coming from a Buddhist perspective. And it's very important to ask them or ask the family, because you don't want to bring in some other kind of terminology and pictures and things they don't resonate with, like that. I've set up altars for people that are in the hospital or in a nursing home passing away based on their instructions or the instructions of the family, what they wanted. Sometimes people want mixed things. They want a picture of the Buddha, they want a picture of Mary and Jesus, and it's all good as far as I'm concerned. Whatever makes them comfortable, like that. Okay. The other things I just was going to ask is, or mention, things about when you show up. And one thing I want to interject, because I know we're running out of time, this could go on for another day, is what kind of paperwork do you have ready about your death? I'm actually updating mine. Here is one called the 5 Wishes. You can get this online. This happens to be from the Hospice of Palm Beach County, but there's many of these, and they're legal in many, many states and commonwealths in the states. And it'll tell you, and what it does is it has very specific things. For instance, wish number 2, my wish for the kind of medical treatment I want or don't want, and it lists very specific things. What you can do is cross out what you don't agree with, and there's space to write in what you want. So you want specific instructions, write it in. But if you say, I do not, here's one of them, what my caregiver should keep in mind, I do not want anything done or omitted by my doctors or nurses with the intention of taking my life. I might not agree with that, I just cross it out, like that. I actually have put these myself into my own document, and then I'm getting that note re-notarized again, because I'm doing, what does life support mean to you? And it has specific things here. And if you don't like it, cross it out, like that. So the thing you want to do is make sure you have a will with an executor and an alternate, and that you have a power of attorney with a person and an alternate, that they've notarized, signed, witnessed, whatever they need to do, that it's legal. And then you're going to have a durable healthcare power of attorney. So you need to make sure that the people you're designating on that, I've got 2 people on that. They're not Buddhist, but they're close. You want to have people nearby that are going to be around to take care of it. And then they have instructions to contact 3 other Buddhist friends that have all agreed they would be my people, And they said they'll fly in from wherever they are and deal with me, deal with the body, deal with the prayers, because the two people don't know what to do. So they have instructions complete with flash drives of my prayers. And so all three of those Buddhist people get all this, and they get the flash drive, and they get a sheet with all the instructions of my prayers and who to contact. And then they will fly in and they'll work with the two people that are carrying out the wishes to make sure it kind of honors, if I'm here when I die, I mean, I might be somewhere else, but you do the best you can. And at least for my mind, it alleviates that whole thing of people don't know what I want and they're kind of guessing. You want to take the guesswork out of it for relations and friends and family, because that can be a torturous thing. They're making decisions. Did she want a feeding tube? Does she have a DNR, a do not resuscitate order? And somebody's like 87, passing away of ravaged with cancer. Do they want to be resuscitated at that point? Which can be so invasive. You know, be clear. And you can update and change those instructions over the years, because it's going to be very different, the instructions I did 20 years ago versus now, versus if I'm still alive in 20 years, I might want something different. And I'm also going to then update the contacts on it, because some of those people that I left may be gone. Okay, makes sense? So take care of the paperwork now. This is a good time to do it. I know a lot of people that have been updating their stuff because they don't know if they're, going to die or not. So we don't know. Now, these are just some basic things we'll finish with. If you are helping people, you come into someone's home, they've agreed you can visit, or you're helping somebody die, ways to help, just a few things I'm going to list. It's best not to hand out advice. If you're not the main caregiver, I've seen people come in and they start, you know what you need to do? Just be there, just show up. Maybe ask them what they need. What can I help with right now? Do you need this cleaned up? I'll do it. You're tired of cleaning the toilet? I'll do it. Like that, okay? It's okay to see the ordinariness of death. I've hung out with some people dying. There they are in their recliner chair in the living room. It's like this seems pretty normal. Does that feel weird? Well, sometimes it's normal, okay? And also understand other times it will be completely chaotic. You'll have one visit, it seemed pretty normal. You come back the next time and the guy can't even speak. And he's soiling himself and just completely freaked out, and everybody's melting down around him. And that's what dying is like. It's not a clean, clear process of this is what happens all the time. Like that. Can you communicate honestly with somebody? Can you communicate honestly? It's not easy. We had a friend dying, the first patient in Tara Hospice at Land of Medicine Buddha in California. Friend of mine died. And at one point I was there with a good friend of mine who was a hospice nurse. We were just the two there and we were visiting, and my friend mostly was in a coma, the one who was dying, not too connected to the external reality. And she woke up and we were both there and we went to the bedside, and she looked very confused and she was flailing a little bit in the bed and trying to get up. She was very weak, and she looked, and suddenly she looked at us and she said, very confused, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? And my friend took her hand very calmly, nodded her head, and she said in a very kind of calm voice, she said, "You're dying, remember? You're dying. This is the dying process." And then my friend kind of got reoriented in the bed, and she was, oh, okay, she got it. She's like, oh, that's right. That's why I can't move. Like she just, but very calm, but not saying like, oh, everything's okay. Like it wasn't okay for her. She couldn't move. So can we find a way to just honestly, and there are some dying people that want to hear about your ordinary day. That's okay. They don't want to talk about death all the time. They want to hear that, you went to that store and that was on sale and this new thing happened to you. They want to hear sometimes what's happening. You can express friendship in the face of death. that you're there for somebody, how much you appreciated their friendship over your life, like that. Talking simply can be helpful at stages, and also you're not freaking out. You can come in and it can be a completely chaotic scene, but I'm going to remain calm. I'm not letting that emergency topple what's happening for me. Again, if we've dealt with our own pain and suffering, it will make it easier to deal with someone else's pain and suffering. The first times you're dealing with enormous suffering of someone else that you cannot fix can be completely unnerving for you. Just be there with it. Don't leave them. Stay there in the room. Let them know you're not going anywhere. It's okay if they need to scream and break down. You are there for them. You're just going to be there. I've told people that. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever you need to do, I'm here. It's hard. It's really hard. And then there's dealing with the politics of dying. I'm sorry, but it really sucks in the States. I don't know if anywhere else. Just with my mother and father and insurance companies, hospitals that are not doing a good job, nurses and caregivers that are not doing a good job, doctors that aren't listening to you. It's social workers and physical therapists and occupational therapists that really want to do their best, and how you have to do the dance of inserting yourself at times when you feel you need to say something, letting go other times, finding the kindness, making offerings to them, which I often did by bringing in sheets of cupcakes and cakes and fruit baskets and everything to just let these people know how much I appreciate them taking care of my dearest loved one, even when they weren't doing a good job, and how we wanted to deal with that, and who you talk to about that, and the meetings, the caregiver meetings, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting. And I'm very grateful that I had a sister and brother to do it with, because it's really unnerving to do it alone, and where you feel like you're the odd man out and they're all insisting you do something, or whatever, that you don't feel comfortable, or your loved one said, I don't want that, and they're insisting this is what needs to happen. So there is all of that as well. And there's more and more, but those are just some of the basic things. I wanted to give you an overview of taking care, getting yourself ready, and taking care of others, and helping them, usher them out through this ultimate transition. Any questions right now? Any last comments or anything like that? Yes, Steve?
Quick question. So when someone, let's say you just don't believe in cremation. So when someone dies and they need 3 days, so is that 3 days that usually they're placed refrigerated, or in Judaism I know you're buried right away. So is that still acceptable as allowing the body to transition? Or you keep them in a certain place or doing prayers, or how is so my question is burying somebody right away just as good as where someone who's deceased can transition?
It is. It's because not removing their organs.
Yes, so it's very interesting, the different transitions, the death rituals I've seen in different countries. Taiwan is predominantly a Buddhist country. There's also a lot of Catholics that live there, but predominantly, and when I was there with the Great Lama, we went to a woman's home to do these last rites for her. She had died. And Taiwan, because it's a Buddhist country and they like to leave the body and have people come and pay respect to the body, they have refrigerated units for the bodies, regardless of the season. And we went, and there it was in their garage, very beautifully laid out with an altar. And we went and visited, and that was their ritual. So funeral homes will take a body for longer and keep it if you want, but everyone has their own ritual. So if you're Jewish or Muslim, they tend to bury right away because it was based on where they were in the world, which is a very hot climate. And out of sanitation and hygiene, they had to bury right away. There really wasn't an option as part of it. But so if you want to be buried according to that tradition and that's what makes your family feel better, then you can opt to do it. The consciousness will leave anyway. But you know, you have to do really according to what your family feels comfortable with. I am from a Jewish background, but I'm going to be cremated, and I've already told my family that, and it's in my instructions. And it's also about leaving the body as long, but what you can do is, as long as some of the main prayers are done and the main people are contacted, you know, then let them advise the family it's okay. And like with my mother, several hours in the room doing all these practices, I contacted Geshe Nawang Drakpa in San Francisco as Rinpoche instructed. He is a great astrologer, and I was very close with him, and he's still alive. He's very old now, but he was the person they said to contact, and I did. And then Geshe said to me, kept asking me, did you do this prayer? And then I said, yes, Geshe, I did. Did you do that? And I said, yes, Geshe, I did. He checked all these things, checked off. I had done all of it. And then he said, okay, you can remove the body now. So even though her consciousness may not have left, but she was going to be in the funeral home for like a day or two by the time we did the funeral at that point. And so whatever it was, I checked and I felt that it was fine. And I continued to do practices then as well. So I think you do whatever you feel your wishes and what works best. You try to work within that framework if you can.
Thank you. Thank you.
Elizabeth?
Yes, I have a question. So I don't have much experience with funeral homes or what goes on behind closed doors, but I sort of had an understanding that when the funeral home sort of prepares the body for viewing, that they sort of tamper with, I mean, the inner organs, maybe I don't know what they do. So the body is not really intact.
Yes, I'm not exactly sure what they do, but some people choose to do embalming. Some people
Right.
don't. You can say that you want it least disturbed or not, but I really think it's more of a matter also of what kind of life you've led, to be more concerned with that, of what imprints are in your consciousness. Certainly disposal of the body and what happens after, you know, can affect that. But hopefully if your life is led in a certain way and you've got certain parameters in place, that will help. And you can give instructions to a funeral home. You know, for me, I have clear instructions not to be touched other than the top of my crown. And I want, you know, just put me in that cardboard box, then I'll be there to the crematorium, and then they can, whatever the easiest way is for anybody like that. So they don't have to touch me at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought that when you're sort of tampering with the body at those very subtle stages, that it could actually distress the very subtle mind and then throw it into an inauspicious direction, you know.
I mean, it possibly could. I think not if you're really with the prayers of holy beings around you and with a good life and things. But the thing is, they have to move your body at some point. And I think, but again, Tara Hospice, when my friend died, they left the body there until Rinpoche said the consciousness left. And it kind of seemed apparent when it left. Her body kind of changed to some of us. And then we called the crematorium and they came and they came to the body. So she really wasn't touched in that place. And there are places that if you die at home, you can set that up like that.
Thank you.
Yes, we can. So let's close there. And I want to thank all of you. Just digest this a little bit. It's a lot to talk about death. There's a lot of information. This just gives you a taste. Take a deep breath and relax, because, you know, it can be a little scary and bring up concepts that aren't familiar to us. That's okay. And it is always a byproduct of talking about death effectively, doing some meditations, which we've done, can bring some discomfort up in the mind. That's actually a positive byproduct of this time. So just let that sit a little bit. It would be neat if the rest of your day you didn't want to dilute it too much with jumping into some boring movie or some activity that, you know, sit with it a little bit. Am I ready for death? What do I need to do to get ready? Is that something I can start to focus on in the next month while we still have this kind of quarantine time? This is a good time to think about some of those things. So, and humility, if it brings your mind down, it's very good for building humility like that. So this is, meditating on death is something we do in meditation. If you find you're meditating and your mind is too distracted with excitement, they say then meditate on death, and it just brings you, right, subdues the mind right down like that. So I'd like to dedicate and say whatever positive energy we've created from our time together, and I want to thank all of you for your wonderful attention, effort, for joining. It's wonderful to see all of you. I'd like to thank Shantideva Center, Sheila and Jennifer for hosting so much, for making this possible. Please think about ways to support Shantideva Center. It's really, really helpful. We need to support our centers now, because without them, this would not have happened, okay? I'm also teaching tomorrow, 10 to noon and 2 to 4 on karma. So everything you want to know about karma, but we're afraid to ask.